What's good, everybody? What's good? It's your boy, Cardinal, Bud, Crawford, or E.S. Red, if that's what you want to call me. And we are back for another one. Alright, y'all. New topic. Terence Crawford left behind. Errol Spence Jr. is moving on. Who next? Alright, y'all. There's some new reports coming out. People are talking about it. The internet's talking about it. The world is talking about it. A chance this fight might not happen. And I've been saying this for a while, man. It might not happen until 2023. I'm still a little optimistic that it happens this year, but it's definitely not looking good at this point. We're a week away from September. Nothing's signed. Nothing is even being hinted at being signed. Absolutely nothing is confirmed or official. All we have is rumors, the rumors that have been circulating for months and months and months now. And I've had from the beginning my own reasoning why I felt like it wasn't going to happen this year, and that had a lot to do with the other super fights that were out there. I think Terence Crawford, Errol Spence Jr. is a little more anticipated of a super fight. I would put Golovkin and Canelo in the same category. You know, people have been talking about that fight for a long time, that rematch for a long time. Wilder Fury was another one. We just had Joshua Ugas. I would say that was anticipated. It was anticipated, but I just don't feel like it was talked about as much. I think people already had Joshua losing. I don't think people felt like Joshua could make the adjustment to beat Ugas. And now we have this situation with Terence Crawford versus Errol Spence Jr. to where Errol Spence Jr. is now tweeting. He's moving on. He's focused on him. He said, "I'm focused on me" in the tweet, but he's focused on him, basically. And I take that as he's moving on. He's not willing to hold the rest of his year up, the rest of his career up, PBC up, you know, Showtime up, Fox Sports. How can I say? There are a lot of business partners that he would be holding up, for lack of a better word, that he would be stalling if he was to say, you know what, I want to keep on negotiating this fight. Not to say they're not going to be negotiating it behind closed doors, but I think publicly he's had enough of trying to get Terence Crawford, Team Crawford, to sign off on this fight. And how is this going to play out in the long run? Who's next at this point? Who does he look to try to face off with now? Could it be Thurman? Could it be Boots? Could it be Virgil? Could he be moving to 154? Is there a name out there that we haven't thought of? Will he match up with Yordenis, you know, who nobody's really talking about, but is still ranked very high in the in all the sanctioning body rankings? Could he possibly pull Pacquiao back out of the hat? You know, as much as people hate to admit it, Errol Spence could still fight Manny Pacquiao and make a humongous amount of money off of that fight. Whether people want to admit it or think Pacquiao can beat him or not, that fight is still bigger than Spence versus Crawford. And would actually probably sell either just as well or better than Spence versus Crawford. Which is crazy. Manny Pacquiao's name just rings bells. And it's not just that Manny Pacquiao's name rang bells, it's that he brings a whole country with him. So of course the fight is going to sell well. Of course, you know, it's going to have a lot of fanfare. Whenever you bring a whole nother country with you, then you have the potential for that event being a mega event. Same thing with Kell Brook. Even though Kell Brook had lost a few times, most of his fights do well because he brings an entire country that is not the U.S. in to view those fights. Same thing with Canelo Alvarez. He brings in another country in, a smaller country, but still another country with a lot of people in it. So, you know, unfortunately for Terence Crawford, he is an American. He is from a smaller state within the Union. So when he puts on the event, it's not going to do as well as if a Manny Pacquiao or Canelo or Kell Brook or Anthony Joshua, as well as those people would do, because they come with a built-in foreign audience. Now, I mean, who's next at this point, and how does this affect the landscape of welterweight boxing? Listen, I feel like even if they don't fight this year, I don't feel like it totally kills things. I think sometimes slower is better because it gives this thing a little more time to marinate, a little bit more time to be built up, a little bit more time for Terence Crawford to possibly make himself a little more popular. Terence Crawford is the reason this fight isn't happening at this point. It's not that he's not a good fighter, it's that he's just not that sellable. He's not that sellable. And he hasn't built up that pay-per-view audience enough to where they can justify, I guess, giving him the dollar amount that he wants. Do I feel like he's worth 15? Easy. Could he build himself up to that 20-25 mark? I think if he was to fight Thurman, he can build himself up from that 10 that everybody's talking about that they're offering him to 15. I think if he was to fight Boots, even though Boots isn't as popular or as wouldn't bring in as much money as the Thurman fight, I think he would build himself up to 20, because I think fans would love that. Even though I think the investors would much rather see him fight like a Thurman or of course Errol Spence Jr. But Boots is the next in line. Boots is the next ESJ. Boots is the next Terence Crawford. So who wouldn't want to see this generation versus last gen, or you know, the new generation versus the current generation? You know, so I think Boots would put him up to that 20 million mark. I think the same thing for Virgil. I think if he fought Pacquiao, then that would shoot him up into that $25 million range. I think either one of those guys can increase their numbers by facing off with Pacquiao. Even though people don't want to hear that, you know, Pacquiao name still carries weight in the boxing world. So who's next? Who is he more than likely to fight next? It depends on who you're talking about. If you're talking about Terence Crawford, I would say Virgil, Boots, Thurman. That would be the order. Pacquiao fourth. I really don't see him giving Pacquiao a shot. Still a dangerous fight. Boots still dangerous. Virgil, very dangerous, but more winnable than Boots, because Virgil, I think a lot of people think, and Terence Crawford probably thinks as well, that he's a one-trick pony. He's just a knockout artist. Boots, he has too many tricks in his bag, and Pacquiao is a classic fighter. So anything can happen in a Pacquiao fight. Now, if you're talking about ESJ, you're talking about Errol Spence Jr., I think it goes Thurman, Boots, Virgil, Pacquiao. But I think ESJ would be more willing to give Pacquiao a shot. Can I throw Pacquiao above those other guys? I don't think I can, because he hasn't mentioned Pacquiao's name. At least Crawford's name's been mentioned with Pacquiao, where Errol Spence's name hasn't been mentioned anymore with Pacquiao. And I think that I think this is gonna play out into 2023. Personally, I don't think it's gonna get solved in 22. I don't think it's enough time left, but I'm still optimistic. Don't get me wrong, I'm not completely writing it off. I'm just highly doubtful. Hit that like button for me, share, subscribe. Holler at me on all social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, but you're more than likely to get a response on the YouTube. So holler at me over there if you want a response. I'm done rambling. Yeah, I'm done rambling for now. It's your boy, Cardinal, Bud, Crawford, or E.S. Red, if that's what you want to call me. And we are Manny.
Finally whipping like that mace.